Before starting this episode, I'd like to apologize to the nation of Japan, everybody of Japanese descent, or anybody who can speak Japanese for my horrendous pronunciations of the names in this episode. Japan, in the years of U.S. occupation following the Second World War, was a broken nation. Hundreds of thousands of people were homeless. Food and other basic necessities were in short supply. In the desperation that gripped the populace, crime grew exponentially. But for some, their crime had less to do with tragic circumstances following the war and more to do with their twisted morality. Welcome to History is Criminal. I'm your host, Mick Biddick, and with me, as usual, is my co host and wife, the unqualified and unapologetic Kimberly. In this episode, we take a look at Akira Nishiguchi, a conman and killer that haunted post war Japan. Kim, are you ready?
Ready, always. And for the record, I'm the one who wrote the whole unqualified and unapologetic thing. I set the bar low on purpose. Because let's be honest, you won't be hearing historical facts from me. No way. My job is strictly sass and bonus commentary. Now let's dig into the dirty past again.
Akira Nishiguchi was born on the 14th of December 1925 in Osaka, Japan. His family had relocated to Osaka from Goto Islands off the west coast of Kyushu. They had been working to raise money for their family fishing business. His parents were devout Catholics who wanted their son to enter the priesthood. It was not long before this that all forms of Christianity had been banned in Japan. The Goto Islands had, despite the ban, remained an isolated Catholic community. Though the ban had been lifted almost 50 years before Akira's birth, many still held strong anti Catholic views. Japan was in a nation of flux in the 1920s and 30s. A wave of traditional and conservative values had caused many to shun Western ideas. In this setting, his family's religion would have led to the family facing discrimination. While he was still very young, the family returned to the small village that they had lived in before Akira's birth. While few official records exist of his life before the war, it's not hard to imagine that the young man would have faced more than his share of torment by his peers. The family's fishing business was doing well, and the Nishiguchis would have been viewed as upper class for the Gato Islands. This allowed the family to send Akira to a Catholic missionary school in
Far away.
Fukura Prefecture. It seems, however, that he was not fond of the strict discipline at the school, and in his third year, with graduation just within sight, he left school and ran away. Akira was reportedly ashamed of what he saw as his failure. In traditional Japanese culture, this shame would be reflected on the whole family. This might have helped push the teenager to run away from home. Some claim at this point he vowed to get rich no matter what he had to do or who he had to step on to get there. For now, to support himself, he turned to a life of petty crime.
Oh, teenagers. Had a few of those with attitudes in our house, didn't we?
Mm-hmm.
Even one who got to know a couple police officers.
This was shortly after the start of the Second World War. Japan was fighting in China and would attack Pearl Harbor, expanding the war into a massive global conflict. It would seem that a young man like Akira would have been a prime candidate for the Japanese army, considering the horrendous crimes committed by the Japanese in China. Someone like Akira would likely have enjoyed himself in Nanking or the Philippines. But before he could become of age, the governments had other plans for Akira. In 1942, at age 17, Akira was arrested for robbery in Beppo. Criminal charges were dropped. In return, he was placed in the juvenile detention center for what turned out to be the duration of the war. Juvenile detention centers in World War II Japan were not summer camps. Conditions would have been harsh and would have only gotten worse with the shortages that came with the war. His incarceration may have also served as a type of criminal finishing school for Akira. At minimum, it would have shaped his worldview at a critical point in his mental development.
Juvenile detention's the place where your world view gets a little twisted. Probably wishing he would have stayed home and not ran away.
As the war ended in 1945, Akira was released and returned to Osaka to study English at an occupation school. That was a school set up by the United States Army after the war. There, he married a woman from Fukuoka and had a child in 1947. Learning the language of the occupying army could lead to excellent economic opportunities, acting as an interpreter for Allied forces, both formal capacity and a more informal capacity, could have given him a fairly stable income. Yet, Akira was looking for ways to make a little more money. Crime exploded in the post war years. Property crimes committed by those trying to make basic ends meet, an increasing number of panpan, Japanese street prostitutes primarily serving U.S. servicemen, and grifters plying their trades in numbers unseen before the war. There were, of course, darker crimes, gangs, native born, Korean, Taiwanese, even some American GIs committed extortion, murder, and sex crimes. Akira's game was extortion. Few Japanese spoke English beyond a handful of words. There was also a major distrust of the occupying Americans, whom the wartime Japanese government had painted as gangsters, rapists, and monsters.
Propaganda at its finest. And honestly, war does bring out the ugly in everyone. So, some truth, some spin, all chaos. Classic wartime mix.
This prevailing distrust of Americans likely added to Akira in his schemes. Claiming an affiliation with the occupying forces, he began to extort money from local businesses. He seemed to have been able to keep this up through 47 and 48 until he was arrested and sentenced to 2 years. On his release in 1950, he was able to enter into a business with an American serviceman and open up a bar in Bappu. Now, why an American serviceman would choose to trust Akira, who has already been to jail a couple times and seems completely untrustworthy, is a whole other mystery we don't have an answer for. With the start of the Korean War, Akira's partner was deployed to Korea, and Akira became the sole owner of the bar. No longer having to split profits with a partner, he was making more than double the average worker's wages. It was around this time, while expecting his second child, that he was caught with American currency. Under the laws of occupation, the possession of American currency was illegal in most cases. He avoided jail but was fined 4,000 yen, which was actually a really tiny amount of money. This latest run in with the law did little to dissuade him in his criminal enterprises.
Sole owner, more money than the average worker, and breaking a few rules along the way. Here we go again.
By 1952, his criminal activity was becoming a little more sophisticated. He came into possession of an American military uniform. It's unknown where this uniform came from, but once in his hands, he found a way to use it to con people out of their money. Using the uniform and his English skills, he convinced people that he was a Japanese American with the ability to procure foreign cars. He would have prospective buyers meet him with cash at a warehouse. Once the money exchanged hands, he would make an excuse to step out of the room and then slip out back of the building with all the buyer's money. By the time they realized they had been ripped off, Akira was gone. For people who were just coming out of a devastating war in the middle of foreign occupation, the Japanese seem way too trusting. I mean, I wouldn't even do this on a Craigslist post. It didn't take long for Akira to be identified as a thief and con man, and he was arrested and this time sentenced to 5 years. He was barely out of jail when he was arrested again for fraud in 1959. It seems that his wife had had enough of his behavior and divorced him. But Akira, playing on his wife's Catholic guilt and traditional Japanese values about divorce, convinced her to remarry him. Although it seems they lived separate lives from this point on, he was working as a delivery driver in Yukashashi. I just butchered that. Something horrible.
Any Japanese listening, ignore my husband. 5 years in jail, back at it, and somehow he convinces his ex wife to remarry him. Catholic guilt and traditional values. Apparently, the ultimate con tools.
October 18th, 1963, he met up with two men, Murata Koshiro and Goro Mori. Koshiro was an employee of the Japanese Tobacco and Salt Public Corporation. He used a vehicle from Akira's employer to deliver large sums of cash and tobacco. Akira offered to help Koshiro and show him a tobacco field he knew of. Now, honestly, this confused me because I didn't even know Japan grew tobacco, but a quick Google search, they do in fact grow at least small amounts of tobacco in Japan.
Learn something new every day.
Mhm. The three traveled in a company van to an isolated area in the Fukuoka prefecture. Once there, Akira lured Koshiro from the car and led him to a secluded spot. Once out of sight, he pulled a hammer from his jacket and beat Koshiro to death. He took the satchel Koshiro carried, containing about 260,000 yen, about $735 American, or 7,200 in 2025. When he walked back to the car, he repeatedly stabbed Mori. According to Info News, a Chinese website, Mori had several wounds from an owl. So one of those tools you use in a wood shop that just has a round handle and just a spike sticking out of it.
Okay, because I thought you spelled the bird's name
You,
owl
you know,
wrong.
it spelled bird wrong. No, it's owl, not owl. I know it probably sounds exactly the same. Soon after, a jogger came on the scene. Police had little difficulty identifying the victims and quickly tied the vehicle to Akira. Witnesses had seen Akira with the two men earlier that day. Additionally, his fingerprints were all over the inside and outside of the van. These facts, paired with a quick background check, told police Akira was a prime suspect.
Victims identified. Witnesses. Fingerprints. Really? Leaning on into the obvious criminal energy, aren't we?
Apparently, he planned so well he didn't understand what fingerprints were. Political pressure added to the need for police to leave no stone unturned in the hunt for the killer. Tokyo had been awarded the 1964 Summer Olympics. The nation saw this as an opportunity to show the world how they had succeeded in rebuilding the country after the war, a chance to revel in national pride after humiliating defeat of war. A nationwide manhunt was launched for the man the newspaper started calling the Black Gold Medalist Killer. Over breakfast on the morning of the 19th, Akira heard his name on the radio. A quick check of the paper confirmed what he already knew. The police were on the look for him. On seeing this, he fled for Sega Prefecture. Again, however, he saw his likeness on a wanted poster in Sega. So he wrote to his wife and to the police in his hometown where she had been living, and it read in part, "I have caused a lot of trouble for everyone. I am really sorry. I will never let you ridicule me after arresting me." On the 24th of October, a passenger on a ferry found a jacket and a pair of shoes near the railing. A search of the jacket pockets uncovered what looked like a signed will and the name of Akira Nishiguchi. This might have spelled the end to the manhunt, except for two things. First, the Japanese police want to be 100% certain the killer was either dead or in custody. Second, they discovered that someone matching his description was seen buying shoes shortly after the ferry made port. Despite knowing Akira to be alive, the police failed to narrow down his location. During the next few days, he traveled across central Japan, adopting the alias and persona of a college professor from Kyoto. This disguise was basically just glasses and a tweed jacket.
Criminals really aren't masterminds. Buying shoes right after faking your death. That's why most of them get caught. But then again, the cops couldn't pin him down either, so not exactly a room full of geniuses.
Yeah, but you gotta love that disguise. Tweed jacket and glasses. Like he just
Superman!
Well, that or he just looked at any picture of any college professor from any movie ever in history. On the 28th of October, he took a room at a hotel in Shitsukura. His professor's getup worked so well that the landlady, Yuki Fuajimi, fell for the fake, bespectacled intellectual. She even seemed willing to overlook the fact that he had numerous women, possibly Pan and geishas, in his room. Before long, the two were sleeping together. Akira soon ran out of money and needed a scam to get some spending cash. Traveling to Hiroshima. Yeah, like that city didn't have enough trouble at this point in history. He scammed an orphanage. Yep, an orphanage in a city recovering from an atomic bomb.
That just sucks.
Convincing a local electronics store that he worked for the orphanage, he took 5 TVs on the orphanage's credit, skipping town and leaving the orphanage with the bill. Hawking the TVs gave him about 80,000 yen, or 220 US dollars, or 2,120 25 dollars. By the 14th of November, he was back with Yuki. Yuki let her stay in his home that she shared with her mother, Haru. 4 days later, he strangled Yuki and Haru before ransacking the home and selling everything for 140,000 yen. On the 22nd, neighbors began to complain of the smell coming from the apartment. Completing a welfare check, police found the bodies of the 2 women. Evidence of Akira's presence at the crime scene was uncovered, including witness descriptions. Police across Japan redoubled their efforts to bring in the most wanted man in Japan.
Most wanted man in Japan. And probably the easiest to find if anyone just followed the smell.
In an act that could seem odd to some Westerners, the detectives traveled to Beppo and had his family write letters urging him to turn himself into the authorities, hoping that there was some semblance of family honor left in Akira. His family was dealing with the disgrace and dishonor of having a killer as a son, and likely hoped by aiding in his capture they could regain some family honor. These letters were published in newspapers across Japan. The ploy didn't work.
Honestly, with his face on 500,000 posters, you'd think he was running for office instead of the law. And with his history, he'd probably win.
Mhm. In Tokyo, he devised a plan to rob a wealthy lawyer, Kamayushi. He arrived at Kamayushi's home and claimed to be a lawyer himself to help with a civil case. Once inside the home, he strangled the 81-year-old lawyer with his own necktie. He then pilfered the home of valuables, including about 140,000 yen in cash, before stuffing the body in a closet. Kamayushi was found 4 days later when somebody noticed the smell.
Follow the smell.
Before killing Kamayushi, while riding the train to Tokyo, Akira saw a face he recognized in the paper. Not his own this time, but that of Teruo Fuakawa. Fuakawa was a Buddhist priest who was leading the fight to stay the execution of a death row prisoner, Saki Medina. Medina had been sentenced to death in 1949, but the evidence was weak, and many felt he was wrongly accused. Akira had briefly met Fukawa when he served as a prison chaplain at the jail where Akira was doing time. He had once served the priest tea when he was there on a jail visit. Akira likely felt that a Buddhist priest, a man dedicated to peace, would be an easy target. So, fresh off the murder of Kamayutsu, he traveled to Kuramota to see the priest. When he arrived at Fuakawa's temple, the priest did not recognize him. Akira had used stolen ID and convinced the priest that he was there to offer legal aid in the Minda case. Furukawa invited the fake lawyer into his home and introduced him to his family, including his 10-year-old daughter, Rikiro. What happened next sounds like something out of a young adult novel, but all sources agree the young girl, in a move that would make Nancy Drew jealous, thought she recognized the visitor. Rikiru politely excused herself, stepped outside, and then she ran to the local community bulletin board where the wanted poster for Akira was hung. Her classmate had a name that only differed from that of the most wanted man in Japan by one character. It was this wild coincidence that caused her to inadvertently memorize the wanted poster, especially the two moles on his face.
Honestly, if the police had half her observational skills, Akira would have been caught 10 crimes ago. Two moles and a name mix up, that's sharper detective work than the cops ever did.
She ran back home, pulled her parents aside in the other room, and told them of her suspicions. Her parents were actually angry, believing the young girl was being dishonorable, and that this man was, quote, a messenger of hope, her father said, and could help free the wrongly accused Minda. Rukiro replied that no, he was a, quote, messenger of evil. The priest would have no more of the girl's nonsense and sent her out of the room. After a while, Furukawa started to have his own suspicions. The more they talked, the more he realized that this lawyer had very little knowledge about the actual law. The priest then excused himself, walked to the same bulletin board, and saw for himself that the lawyer was, in fact, Akira Nishigoshi. Keeping his cool, he returned home, and while his wife kept Akira busy, he installed a lock on part of the house to keep his family safe. Then the priest offered Akira a place to stay for the night. The fake lawyer accepted the generous offer and turned in for the night. Once he was sure Akira was asleep, he secured most of his family in the locked part of the house and then sent his wife and eldest daughter to the police station. The small town police force wasn't ready to take on the most wanted man in Japan, so they waited for backup. Meanwhile, the two women, to avoid suspicion, returned home. The family waited as a serial killer slept in the next room. It would be fair to assume the family didn't sleep that night. In the morning, Akira woke up, greeted the family. Soon as he started to feel like something was off, maybe the fact that everyone in the family knew he was a killer created a strange vibe. He told the family suddenly that he had to leave on important business. Gathering up his things, he stepped out the door to find the house surrounded by police. And he gave up without a fight.
Props to the family for pulling off the most awkward sleepover ever. Imagine trying to make small talk over breakfast with a serial killer.
Hmm. Questioned by police, Akira fully admitted everything: the murders of Koshiro and Mori, how he took advantage and then killed the Fujimis, and the strangulation of Kamiyoshi. He even told the authorities that he planned to kill Furukawa once he had the money that was being raised for Minda's defense. Fraud is troublesome, he said. It's easier to kill. At trial, he was sentenced to death by hanging. It would be almost 6 full years from the time of his sentence until his hanging. During that time, Furukawa visited him in his cell to offer spiritual comfort. Furukawa and his family were honored as heroes for their part in Akira's capture. When Furukawa learned that Akira's children and wife were being shunned because of his actions, he volunteered to pay their tuition and fees for Akira's children. Roako and Akira's eldest son even became close friends. Unfortunately for Akira's parents, they weren't as lucky. The publicity of their son's crimes caused them to be outcast, and their fishing business went bankrupt.
Children becoming friends? That's either the most wholesome plot twist or the setup to a really awkward family
Mm.
dinner.
In a somewhat ironic twist, Akira's execution was witnessed by Saki Minda, the man Morikawa worked to free. Minda would later be proven to be wrongfully convicted and was released from jail in 1983 after 34 years.
That took a long time.
34 years, then proven to be wrongfully convicted. Akira Nishiguchi was executed on the 11th of December, 1970. His last words were, "Please cast my ashes on Beppu Bay. Amen. In the end, he was convicted of 5 murders and set a country on the edge for months. Maybe if he didn't buy a pair of shoes after his fake suicide, or if little girls didn't think it was odd that her classmates shared a nearly identical name with the killer, he might have been able to add to that body count. But in the end, however, Japan's most wanted killer was done in by an observant 10-year-old. And I, for one, hope that ate him up the entire time he waited for the hangman's noose.
Imagine planning elaborate crimes, fake suicides, and then getting outsmarted by a 10-year-old. Not exactly the criminal mastermind legacy he was going for. Karma really does have a sense of humor.
A shout out to Kyoto Rebeto and his work, Messenger of Evil, that can be seen on YouTube, among many other sources for this episode. This has been History is Criminal. Join Kim and I next week as we look at the Lost Dauphin of France. So those will be French names, should be a lot easier to pronounce because they're almost everybody's named Louis.
Yeah, right. We'll find out.
Until then, if you like what you heard, tell a friend. And if not, tell an enemy. Never suffer alone.